really is to build strong public-private partnerships that drive resilience at the local and national level. So this is where we harness private sector expertise, their tools and services, and periodically engage with the private sector. That's the role of the public sector in this regard. While the private sector participate in multi-stakeholder forums, set informed about public needs, and provide expertise, tools, and services. We've seen this work in places like Marikina, where local businesses and city government coordinate on flood control systems and emergency response drills. In Mindanao, in Davao, we've helped set up local resilience hubs where businesses and responders can coordinate during typhoons and earthquakes. What makes this partnership strong? There are three distinct things. One, regular communication. It's important for us to have a strong private sector engagement by making sure that we are communicating regularly with our private sector partners. We also have to have clear and distinct roles. What are the boundaries of this partnership? How can we engage the private sector considering their expertise and what they can bring to the table? And also joint planning and training. So it's also important and imperative for us to hear the private sector's voice in order to implement and influence policies even at the local level and at the national level. Think of it this way. Disasters don't care about sector boundaries. They impact everyone. Same goes with climate emergencies. And so a response must also cut across boundaries. Second is that resilience in built environment is driven by public sector raising minimum standards and giving the private sector an enabling environment. So the second strategy is one that anticipates climate risks and responds proactively. This includes designing flood-resilient buildings, using climate-smart materials, and integrating nature-based solutions in urban planning. Ayala Land, for example, and this is also applicable in the malls and the facilities by the SM Group, has integrated flood management, renewable energy, and green open spaces into their estates. However, this shouldn't be limited to large developers. Even small contractors and housing cooperatives can use resilient design if given the right training and incentives. Climate resilience in infrastructure is not a luxury. It's an investment in safety, productivity, and long-term sustainability. And lastly, a resilient-sensitive public sector and a resilient-sensitive private sector drive each other toward resilient societies. The government sets the tone. With policies, incentives, and plans, the private sector responds with innovation, implementation, and also accountability. But often, it could also work in reverse. When companies adopt high sustainability standards, it pushes the government to improve public policies. For example, the financial sector is now, and other sector for that matter, is now integrating ESG standards and climate risk into investments and decisions. This is helping drive new climate financing policies at the national level. When each side supports each other, the whole ecosystem becomes more adaptive and forward-thinking. And now, to document strategies on private sector engagement that is designed for local government units, in November of 2024, we launched the Private Sector Engagement Playbook for Climate Resilience through the Climate Resilient Cities project funded by the United States Agency for International Development. The CRC project is also where we met the gallant men and women of the Manila Observatory as we worked with them through a few of the activities, or not a few, but major activities and outputs of the project. The playbook gives practical strategies for engaging the private sector in climate action, from planning to implementation. What's special about this document is that it's designed with both local government and private sector in mind. It's a tool for building real and local impact. Now, the objectives of the playbook is as straightforward as the 5 items that you see on screen. It aims to empower local government units, facilitate partnerships between the government and the private sector, promote innovation for both the private sector and the public sector, build capacity, and drive sustainable development. And why did we come up with this playbook? The rationale behind is simple. increasing frequency and intensity of disasters is seen here in the country, and there's also a need for structured engagement between the sectors for us to graduate on the notion that the private sector is just there to give money and resources, and to also bridge gap in collaboration. Now, the key features of the playbook are shown on screen. So we have identified principles of effective partnerships, case studies and practical tools, and framework for planning, implementing, and monitoring. Now, for you to get a copy of the playbook, perhaps you can scan the QR code you see on screen. So we have an electronic copy. I forgot to bring printed copies. I actually prepared that before going here in the office, but I was not able to. I forgot to bring it with me. So I added this slide with a QR code for you to browse through the document and see for yourself how we can engage the private sector further in climate resilience. I'll give you a couple of seconds. You can also take a photo of me if you want. But to wrap up our discussion this afternoon, resilience must be everyone's business. It should be a way of living. I mean everyone, from factory managers to farmers, logistic companies to app developers to academicians, students, and intrinsically as an individual. Because the climate crisis doesn't choose its victims. It affects all sectors, all regions, and all people. But here's the good news though. We can turn vulnerability into leadership, and we can turn risk into responsibility. If every one of us trains, understands, works, and supports our community, we build a culture of preparedness. We build a nation that can stand strong and not just survive. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for listening and tuning in. Maraming salamat po.
Yeah. Thank you, Lexi, for this very insightful talk. The floor is now open for questions. Anyone?
So thanks very much, Lexi. Yes, I've learned a lot about, and I'm actually curious also about PDRF. So is there like membership to this, or how do you, I guess, engage then with the private sector? Like, are they part of the organization, or it's through the projects? Yeah, thanks.
So there are many arms in the services that the PDRF provides. And to answer your question first, Doc, yes, this is a membership foundation. So we have more than 80 businesses as members. And we can engage further along the years of our being in operations. Now, more than that, we also have programs that are funded externally. Say, for example, the Climate Resilient Cities Project, which we are glad to be partnered with the Catholic Relief Services and the United States Agency for International Development. So there are many work streams that are involved in the operations of the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation. We're also managing our operations center in Clark, and this is the central nervous system of our operations during and in preparation for a certain calamity or a disaster. So this is where we coordinate the efforts of the private sector in providing humanitarian assistance and disaster response needs, and also transitioning to rehabilitation and recovery. But in my case, I am from the Development Programs and Innovations Unit, so we are catering to the recovery programs and also other development programs. And we're excited to also partner with the Manila Observatory, as mentioned by Father Jet earlier. As a matter of fact, we have something that is brewing in our programs that we wish to partner with the Manila Observatory, and this is in July for the observance of the National Disaster Resilience Month. But again, there's a lot of opportunity that we can still collaborate even after the NDRM. Yeah.
Wala na magtatanong? Wala kayong tanong? But thank you, Alex. My question is something like, I don't know if there's an answer to this question. Normally when you look at the private sector, you sometimes I guess the caricature is that these guys are just for profit, or
Mhm.
their commitment is just to their shareholders. How can they be concerned about the common good? And parang the caricature is that if it's common good, gobyerno yan. No? Kasi we are supposed to be above all these competing interests. Kasi you guys, I mean, we understand that you, private sector, you have an agenda. And we understand that you have to make a profit, right? You have to have some margin to be able to sustain yourselves. And so, how do you sort of move the private sector to be concerned about public good, not just private good?
Mhm.
Kasi pag disaster, that's public eh. It's
Mhm.
lahat.
Mhm.
Kahit na hindi mo supplier, di ba? Tao yan eh. So, ang tanong, is it, I mean, you don't also want them to be government. They're not government.
Yes.
So, I don't know if if you've encountered this, or if you've reflected on this. I don't know if you tackled this in the MDRR program, but I think it's a live question.
Yes.
For example, you look at Ateneo. They say it's a private school, but it's a private school that has it serves a public good,
Mhm.
right? It's not a public school. It can be. It was a public school in the beginning. But then, yun na nga eh, how do you say, okay, you shareholders, you stockholders, don't just be concerned about your wallet and your bottom line. Let's be concerned about Philippine society. Let's be concerned about the poor,
Mhm.
or those who cannot buy our products. Di ba? Paano kaya yun?
Excellent question, Father Jet. I actually have thought about that when I first transitioned from the government to the private sector with the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation. And one thought that popped into my mind when I was asking myself that same question was, I think it's important for the private sector to uphold this standard, as the public is their consumers. So without the public, definitely their business or their enterprise would not survive. And if they have that in mind, where it's consumer-centric, then definitely the notion that corporate social responsibility is just there for compliance would be eradicated. Because most of the times, ang laging sagot is that that's CSR. That's our way of giving back to the community. But if you're going to look at it at the very core, ginagawa lang yon ng iba for compliance, because they should be doing that. However, if their mental model is designed in a way that it's forward-thinking, particularly on the fact that the end users of their products and services is the public, then definitely maiiba din po yung pagsesell nung idea with the private sector, and we can engage them further, complementing the work of the government. I agree with what you stated, that the government still leads and we complement. However, the private sector can also bring more to the table other than resources, but we do also have technical skills, scientific skills, and others that the private sector can bring. But that's a good research, if I may. Kung pwede natin siyang gawing thesis, paano pa ma-engage further ang pribadong sector in a way that it's not just compliance to policies and whatnot. Yeah. I hope I answered your question, Father. Sige po.
I used to be with big business. NGO na ako ngayon. I'm Chali Dimaano. I am a trustee of Haribon Foundation, who is one of the lessees in this building, and we thank you for inviting us to this forum. I used to be with Ayala Corporation. So, and you are right, no? Consumer, if you do not protect the environment, eventually it will affect the consumer, and the consumer is the one that gives money to big business. But broader than that, there is already a concept of stakeholders, especially in large corporations, that you are not just after profit for your wants, that the shareholders or the owners of the company is just one stakeholder, but your other stakeholders is actually your community, your suppliers, your consumers, as you mentioned, the government, the environment in particular. And if you realize that that is your universe, you will protect and you will have a partnership with all of that. And the employees then, kasama yun.
Yes.
You will have a partnership with all of the stakeholders, not just your shareholders or the one who gets the profit. So the business has to benefit everyone. You cannot sacrifice one for the other, and profit is not the ultimate goal, but it is the benefit of all of the stakeholders forming that universe. Now, but the problem is, it is actually recognized by big business, but the smaller businesses still go for the profit motive. So, I think PDRF is composed mostly of large businesses, but there should be an effort to get the rest of the private sector aligned with this kind of mentality. So, I guess that is PDRF's job.
I agree, ma'am. Actually, if you're going to browse the private sector engagement playbook for climate resilience, there's a specific chapter there for stakeholder analysis that could also bring more substantive explanation to what you've mentioned earlier. And since this is designed for local government units, the target really is the ones, are the businesses that are working on the ground. Sige po.
We all know that global warming is actually one of the bigger, well, if not the main problem, no, and which is why you have PDRF. We all know that the Philippines does not contribute significantly to global warming. It is mainly the bigger nations, no, and given that Trump is not too keen on protecting the ozone layer, what can the private sector in the Philippines do in their small way to address the root cause of this problem?
Very good question po. I think most of the thrust of major private sector companies here in the Philippines is to be net zero by a certain year, just to be carbon neutral. And so it's important for us to be able to acknowledge that, and as well as the government by providing incentives and policies in carbon crediting and other strategies in making sure that the private sector can still contribute to this stance or to this efforts of us not contributing to the bigger problem. So, yun po ang nakikita natin na maging solusyon for the private sector to prioritize being carbon neutral in a certain time duration para at least mabilis nga po. Yung iba mga by 2030, yung iba by 2040, depends on the adaptive capacity of the private sector company to pursue carbon neutral initiatives. Yes. But as individuals, we can also contribute. No, again, it's a shared responsibility. So intrinsically, as individuals, we can contribute to the solutions of the climate crisis by, being green and being sustainable. And so, yeah, we can do that. And that's what I like here in Ateneo, or even in MO. Yeah.
Hello. Yes, I'm from Genetics for Environment. Hello. Question na po.
Kapag meron pong initiatives yung private sector and then i-apply siya sa isang area, so how do you resolve if merong possibility na iba yung gustong i-implement ni government, iba rin yung gustong mangyari ni local community, and iba rin yung gustong i-implement ni private sector? So is there a certain strategy to come up with a final solution in terms of development and recovery?
Yeah. Very good question. And this boils down to the concern of fragmentation of efforts. To answer that question, what we do in PDRF is we do baselining. In order for us to identify the problem that we need to address with our local counterparts and our communities, we talk to them first. Now, understand what the problem is. It's also part of the Sendai framework. You have to first understand the risk in order for us to identify strategic and more prompt and appropriate solutions for that specific problem. And so what we do is we engage with first the local government unit in order for us to identify their priorities for development, whether it's disaster risk reduction and management and climate change adaptation, and also talk with the community. So magkakaroon tayo ng triangulation. No, because it's not a one-size-fits-all thing when we introduce development programs. Most local government units and communities have different problems and different sets of challenges. And so we have to make sure that we understand that in order for us to not make the efforts go to waste. Yeah.
Wala na pong tanong. Father Jet.
Sorry, nahiya silang magtanong eh. Pero Alex, nakita ko kasi DSWD, tapos PDRF. Ito minsan kasi tanong to na, again, hindi madaling tanong. Minsan, iniisip natin, may disaster, di ba? Pag pumasok ka dyan, tumulong, minsan yung dapat tumulong, hindi na tumutulong. Nandiyan ka na, nauna ka na eh. And sometimes you say, dapat DSWD yan eh. Yung trabaho nila, bakit ako yung nagbibigay ng, di ba? And then that's where you realize that government also is trapped, di ba? But you also want to capacitate the public sector. Trabaho nila yun eh. Tapos papasok ka, di spoiled sila eh. Di ba? Anong gagawin nila? Sayang, dami nilang resources. Kasi kung tutusin, mas maraming pera ang gobyerno kaysa sa private sector. Pero ikaw yung tumutulong eh. So, anong gagawin ng gobyerno? Sige, kayo na lang. Pwedeng ganun mangyari. How do you avoid that? I mean, how you want it to be a partnership eh. Na, kayo rin, DSWD, o PGH, o whatever, dapat kayo yun eh. Dito lang kami kasi nga, di ba, tumutulong. How do you make that partnership work?
Well, first, what I have in mind is really, when it comes to disaster response, our practice in the PDRF to complement the works of the government is that the government should first exhaust their resources. Yes, and if ever the resources are scarce, that's where the private sector can contribute. We implement the cluster system as well in the private sector, where our private sector companies are grouped based on their nature of businesses. So there are telecommunications cluster, there's a water cluster, and that also goes the same with the government. So it's going to be complementary. And in order for us to avoid the leadership vacuum in disaster response, it's a constant communication between us and PDRF through our Emergency Operations Center and through the National DRRM Council. That goes the same with the local government units. It's everything should course through the government para alam din po nila yung takbo ng pribadong sektor, and from then malalaman din namin kung ano yung kailangan on the ground for us to avoid fragmentation, wastage of resources, and all other issues that arise from efforts for disaster response. But the thing here, Father Jet, is that it's super important for us to really drive the communication mechanisms during disaster response between the government and the private sector para yung po mga problemang nabanggit nyo po ay maiwasan.
Sasagot ulit ako, Father, sa tanong mo. Ang ginawa namin dati noon sa Ayala Foundation pag may disaster, kinakap namin yung donations ng relief goods. Merong cap, may maximum. Pero nauuna, ang advantage kasi ng private sector, lalo na kung nationwide ang coverage, mabilis gumalaw. Wala kang
walang red
procurement
tape
issue eh. So, mabilis gumalaw, may tao ka on the ground, usually may head office ka, yung LGU, minsan hindi pa makakagalaw yon. Mauuna kami pero may cap. Tapos pag ready na yung government, papasok na siya, atras na yung private sector. But in all cases, there's cooperation, and as you said, the donations are coursed through the government. So there's really that notion na dapat gobyerno nandito, pero tutulong kami at tutulong mauuna kung saan kailangan, pero aatras pag nandun na yung gobyerno.
Siguro sasagot, pwede bang sagot lang
Yes,
sa
Father.
conversation eh. Kasi, kung tutusin rin naman, yung gobyerno rin, I think, in certain instances, di ba, the resources, they may have a lot of resources, but I guess sometimes they're not as efficient.
Mhm.
No. Yeah, I remember kasi nung Yolanda, 2013 yun eh.
Yes.
We had a relief here eh, sa
Mhm.
covered courts. Packing, laking operation yun dito. Kasi, but we knew Yolanda was going to happen several days before.
Mhm.
We knew that it was going to be terrible. We had the forecast eh. I mean, not we na Manila Sabater, we Pag-asa, you know, we knew. And there were warnings. Then I remember President Pinoy coming here. Sa covered courts eh. Seeing the packing and all. And we were all trying to get goods. Kasi sabi ko, Noy, ano pa yan? Ang bagal ng gobyerno. Ano? Ilang libo na yung namatay. Di ba? And sabi niya, ang hirap. And I could appreciate how difficult it was to bring goods from even Manila to Tacloban.
Yes.
Even by land.
Mhm.
No, kasi sira yung airport nun eh. So they just had to use the land trip through Sorsogon, Samar, and then cross, di ba? But I appreciated rin the side of government na hindi talaga kaya, hirap, kahit anong galing mo. It was unprecedented also. But, Yolanda is going to happen again eh.
Yes.
As you know, yung may poster kami dyan, A Tale of Two Typhoons, di ba? There was a similar typhoon 100 years or so ago, that hit Tacloban also and all. So, it's going to happen. And then, ang tanong na lang is, how do we, strengthen this resilience? But we do appreciate, the difficulty and complexity
Yes.
of this issue, that all hands on deck talaga. And you cannot just point fingers and say, gobyerno, dapat ikaw. Hindi. Pag dumating yan, lahat, we all rise to the challenge.
Exactly, Father.
Then the challenge then becomes leadership.
Mhm.
Kasi lahat gustong tumulong eh. Pero yun, may duplication,
Yes.
may underserved areas, di ba? So, kailangan may piloto, at mahirap kung marami nagmemeron din, di ba?
Totoo po.
Kasi lalo magkakagulo. Anyway, so yun lang, just to add to the conversation
Of
itself.
course,
no?
Father. And that's super appreciated. I remember a lecture I attended where resilience is tagged as not a state that we need to achieve, but resilience is a process that's never ending. Risks are dynamic. The risks that we have right now may not be the same as the risks that we have in the next 5 years or 10 years. And so we have to really strive for achieving something that could protect everyone in this country. Yeah.
I have a question kung wala pa. So how do you prioritize if in case, or where do you, for example, because there are many disasters that can happen within the year, is there a way of, like parang what triggers this assistance, or if it's more of coming from the LGUs, they come to you?
So the decision of having decision of priorities we are based on the reports that we gather from the ground. Para din po ma-tailor fit namin yung type of response and humanitarian assistance needs na kailangan po ng ating mga iso-serve na communities. And so we coordinate still with the government to identify which are hit hardest and what are their needs, be it food, be it water, shelter, and whatnot. And so from there, na-i-course through po natin ang mas maayos yung mga resources from our member companies based on which cluster that they belong to, and also try to complement it with how the government works at the national scale or even at the local scale.
Magandang hapon po. I'm Erica from Regional Climate Systems Laboratory. Thank you po for sharing the noble cause of PDRF. I'd like to know po, in addition to what has been brought up kanina, ang focus po ba ng PDRF ay mostly sa yung resources ninyo ay naka-focus lang sa mostly sa disaster response, or meron din po bang mga programa para sa preparedness? Kasi na-bring up na lagi namang may disaster and maaaring maulit-ulit yung mga nangyari dati. Meron din po bang programa na about sa disaster preparedness to further strengthen yung resilience?
Very nice question. Yes po, the work of the PDRF stretches across the 4 pillars of the RRM. So we have footprints for prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and rehabilitation and recovery. To give out a few examples for disaster preparedness, we partnered with the government in the development of the Public Service Continuity Planning Guidebook, which is now being used to plan the service continuity initiatives of the public sector from the national to the local level. But more than that, we also have the preparedness programs for our micro, small, and medium enterprises, and that's through the different work streams of PDRF. For us in the development programs and innovations, we are holding the climate portfolio of PDRF. We handle the Climate Resilient Cities project, and now we transition to building resilience through inclusive development and gender equality that's now funded by Global Affairs Canada. So meron din pong mga efforts on climate change adaptation and also gender and development advocacies, ang Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation. And we also have recovery. In 2022, there are a few programs for the recovery efforts after Typhoon Odette in Mindanao, and that's also in partnership with a few member companies of PDRF and international organizations as well. So marami din pong mga opportunities and programs ang PDRF na implemented not just only by PDRF but also in partnership with other organizations, development organizations for that matter.
Thank you for the very nice presentation, and I'm actually ang dami kong natutunan. Pero curious kasi ako dun sa how PDRF is operating. You mentioned earlier that it's like a membership, so I guess private sectors, business sectors are nagiging member ng PDRF. I'm curious kung ilan sa mga current members ninyo ngayon yung mga would be considered as big businesses or private entities, and ilan yung mga MSMEs, and if so, I mean kung konti ba yung MSMEs or konti pa ba yung in general yung both the big private and business sectors and also the MSMEs, how do you encourage them to join, to be a member, to be part of this initiative for these businesses and private entities? This is an attractive endeavor for them.
Right, very good question. I honestly, I don't have the exact answer to some of your questions, but first is that PDRF doesn't have an MSME member yet. PDRF is a member of the Resilience Core Group with the Department of Trade and Industry, and that is where we provide support for our micro, small, and medium enterprises. So mostly the membership of PDRF are those big companies. And to name a few, top of mind, again, we have Ayala, MVP, Jollibee, McDonald's, UPS. There's also other airlines that are members of PDRF that we mobilize when we transfer goods and resources to the islands and other provinces in the country. Who else? Meralco. So those big corporations. But I don't have the number in mind right now. But yeah, PDRF is not a foundation for, well, we don't have any membership for MSMEs, but we have avenues to provide support to them. Again, like the Resilience Core Group and the Philippine Preparedness Partnership with the Office of Civil Defense, Center for Disaster Preparedness, and the University of the Philippines Resilience Institute. So if there are any efforts that are targeted for those sectors, then we can avenue those through the different partnerships that PDRF is a member of. Hopefully, soon, we can have groups of MSMEs as part of PDRF. I think it's an important thrust because we also have to listen to their case at the communities and at the local level.
Last na. Can you go to one of your early slides? Sige pa. Public. Yeah. Sige pa. Sige pa. Sige pa. Simula yata eh. Sa simula. Sige pa. Page up.
This is the first.
Sige pa. Yan. Oh. Anong ginagawa ng taong sa gitna?
Si Cardinal Tagle is the mediator of the two big bosses.
Hindi, kasi tinanong ko yan. Sorry, ang bias namin, ano kami, civil society kami, academy. Well, Chapuera, saling-pusa lang ba kami dito?
No, hindi naman.
Actually, when you say public, private, the third social sector is civil society.
Yes.
Is academe. Well, I put academe under civil society. And I put the church also there. We have a vast network.
Exactly.
The church.
Mm-hmm.
Di ba? I mean, if you want mobilization, pag-relief, yung simbahan.
Isang tawag lang.
Yeah. And I remember once, nung amateur pa kami noon, he said, uy, pakisabi sa mga parishes, may darating na bagyo. Text lang eh.
Mm-hmm.
Napunta sa mga kura paroko yan. Buong Pilipinas, di ba? Yung coverage. So I was wondering, ayun, mediator lang ba kami ng sa boxing? Or are we actually also an important leg in this bangko? Ano? Kasi kung dalawa lang nga, di ba? Hindi ka makakaupo. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not asking you to recruit church and academe to the PDRF, no? But I think when you have a disaster, the civil society is also a very crucial part. Thank you.
And that's exactly po the role of Cardinal Tagle in the mix, to provide the guidance and to also steer how PDRF would go in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to listen to him when he joins the board meetings. But definitely, that's one thing that I'd be looking forward to in the next few months, kung papala rin po. But what I know of is, apart from being a mediator, he really provides guidance and wisdom on how PDRF can steer the service to not just only the private sector, but the public. Sige po.
I remember nung COVID, the business sector at the very first few months of COVID. The business sector donated, I forget the number, but billions of pesos in cash. Now, the problem then was naka-lockdown lahat, buong Pilipinas. It was the church who actually distributed the food coupons to the public, to the indigents. I think it was Caritas, tama ba? PDRF dumaan yun if I recall. It was coupons, pure gold coupons yata yun, no? Nagbigay ng perang business sector, they did not have a facility to distribute. It was the church which knew, alam nila kung ano yung mga indigent families, ang simbahan ang nag-distribute ng food coupons in the early months of COVID. It was billions of pesos and it helped these families through at least the first few months of COVID na wala talaga makain. So, I think the church is being used by the private sector in not just climate resilience, but in all of the other programs that are aimed to benefit, because the reach of the church is significant, and it is the church that actually gets to that sector that probably needs help the most.
Ayan. So, thank you again, Lexi. Let's give him a warm round of applause para sa malaman na diskusyon. So, Father, we'd like to call you lang po to present to Alex or Masiglat the certificate and token of appreciation. So, basahin ko lang po yung certificate of appreciation. So, this is presented to ENT Alex R. Masiglat for his insightful and invaluable contribution as resource speaker at the Manila Observatory's 160th anniversary lecture series entitled AMBAG, Agham sa Banig, Conversations on Science, Service, and Society, given this 25th day of April 2025 at the Manila Observatory at Ateneo de Manila University Campus, Loyola Heights, Quezon City. Ayan. Thank you, thank you. Father, if you would like to share something for to end this day.
To end this day. Ay, salamat. To end this day, hindi pa tapos kasi may pagkain tayo. Diba? Ba't may kanin? May kanin?
Yung kanina from lunch.
Ha?
From lunch po yan.
Kung gusto nyo mag-lunch ulit. Pero sa totoo lang, maraming salamat. This has been a very, I think, busy but fruitful day, the good harvest. We started early. The secretary came here at 9 o'clock. So we had to scramble, but I think it's a very good beginning. And we have so many people to thank for. I guess yung mga talagang alam nyo kung sino kayo, di ba? But I think all this was headed by Mariel, so we thank Mariel. Yeah. Thank you, Mariel, for all the blood, sweat, and tears for organizing this. And it's her team. Sino ba yung team? Maan, Jonas, Ate Salve, Randall, Jen, Lizzie, yes. Sino pa papasalamatan? Ha? Lahat na rin. Kayong mga gumawa ng mga posters, at nag-practice at lahat. Simula pa lang to, di ba? Kumbaga, level of activity, nandito tayo. By around September, we will accelerate, right? for our lecture, Gemma Turisma, and then an international conference, and then Doc Face conference with the ASEAN, whatever. Whatever. Care for C, whatever that means. What that? Yung cities ba yun? Oo, cities project. So, with that, we end this first day, first of many days of coming together to celebrate our tradition.